Good afternoon. We're starting in verse 19. We're going to do three verses today, 19 through 21. This is a psalm of lament. Now, again, the structures of the psalms are not necessarily always things that hold true in every circumstance. We have to remember that the psalm, we don't know for certain. There are stylistically and structurally things that are similar. Did the psalmist begin writing with the structure in mind, or did they just kind of write similar psalms? They fall into a category. So we can't start off by thinking that because of the structure of the psalm that there is some kind of hidden, like there's a hidden style here, like novel versus short story versus play versus sonnet versus poem, right? That's not necessarily what's going on. However, we do find that many psalms are similar, and we've noted these similarities, and they, for the most part, function similarly. They act similarly, they read similarly. So this is a psalm of lament, and one thing I want to bring up about the psalm is the psalm of lament desires to macro, large scale. The psalmist is in a bad place, whether it's emotionally or in David's context, politically. Um, you know, sin with the story of Nathan the prophet and um, Bathsheba. So being in a bad place, then you write a psalm to process through your negative emotions and get to a place that is good. Typically, how one does that is we describe the situation, there's a plea to God for help, and usually the answer for the psalm of lament is to draw upon past experiences so that we can kind of before he'll rescue us again. But reason or the work of a psalm of lament is to move us through negative emotions or just negative stuff. Like it can be emotions or it could be very real things. Um, David was often at the knife's edge with King Saul. So they were friends, not just what David thought about them or what he felt about them, right? It wasn't just his emotions, these are real life things. So I don't want to dismiss it and say this is all just about feelings. That's not the case, but we're moving from a place of anguish, a place of fear, a place of anxiety, a place of sadness, depression, perhaps even anger, to a place of peace, a place of hope in God, the peace that comes from that hope, a place of joy, perhaps, um, and a place of trust or faith that God will deliver. Okay, so we start with Psalm or verse 19. We're going to work through verse 21, and I only bring up all that to say that today's verses are a bit of a buzzkill. They really are very negative. David is describing his situation, and he does it in a very negative way. Sometimes I have to admit, I kind of wonder if David is a bit dramatic, or um, maybe he's prone to hyperbole. He very much seems to make mountains out of molehills, although David has suffered a lot of things. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to know what's real and what isn't. And then you factor in the fact too, like, is this just David talking, or is David prophesying, and we're hearing the actual voice of Christ? Well, if that's the case, then it makes absolute sense that David would talk like this. I think today we should definitely rope that in because when you hear the verses for today, you'll just be amazed at how much they reflect this truth that David is speaking prophetically for Christ. So there was a book I wanted to open up real quick and read from today, and it's Luther on the Psalms, but I don't seem to have it handy. I don't know where it disappeared to. I wanted to see what Luther wrote on this psalm. My guess is that Luther very much conceded this was talking for that this was Christ kind of speaking through the text. Where did I put that silly textbook? It used to be sitting right here. Oh well, maybe next time I'll read that. Let's go forward. So start with verse 19. Ata yadata, herpati, ubaseti ukalimati, negdeka, kal soore. Okay, so you know my reproach, my shame, my dishonor. So everyone, reproach, shame, and dishonor all have the pronoun for my at the end of it. That's why we get herpati, ubaseti, ukalemati. It's the yod at the end that makes all of these my. Then the vav at the beginning is where our ands come from, right? So baseti, so it's basach, and then it's what kalam. So let's look at this word here, reproach. You know my disgrace, scorn, shame. ESV goes with reproach because I'm guessing this is one of those places where Hebrew does several words in a row that are basically the same. So this one is also shame, but humiliation. This one seems more strictly shame, whereas the other one can be reproach. And what's the difference? Well, there's synonyms in English. Shame is pretty straightforward. I think the difference would come in like how they're explained in terms of passive versus active. So shame is something not necessarily passive versus active, but you'll see what I'm getting at in a sense. I feel shame if I've done something wrong. Reproach is something that's aimed at me from someone else when they're disappointed in me, right? So I'm feeling the reproach of other people. I'm feeling the shame internally. So not only are the people outside of me kind of rebuking me or disapproving of what I've done, but the people, but even myself, I feel shameful about what I've done. So you know my reproach, my shame, and my dishonor. Let's look at this one: dishonor, disgrace, dishonor, humiliation, insults, reproach. So you know the fact that other people basically are rebuking me, or they think I deserve shame. I think I'm shameful myself, and my dishonor, so my place in the community has been affected. No longer do I have honor, but I am dishonored, right? Before you, not sure how to make sense of this grammar here. So basically, before you, my adversaries are, or all my adversaries are, right? Which is a very kind of a Hebrew way of saying something. And the translation we get is, my foes are all known to you. Right? So they're all before you. You can see them all. The Lord, David is saying something interesting. He's speaking to the Lord, and he's saying, you know my reproach, you know the shame that I have internally, you know the dishonor. I've been, my position in the community has been kind of broken down. All my adversaries, the people who are doing this to me, they're all known to you, right? Um, so verse 18 before this is, draw near to my soul and redeem it, because of my enemies deliver me. So David is maybe giving a reason for deliverance. Like, why would you deliver me? Well, so you know what I've been going through. You know what I've seen. You know what's been happening to me, what the people have been saying to me. So in this respect, we can see, just the passion narrative of Jesus, but we could also talk about his life too. The continual rejection of him, the way they treated him. They were always looking for, I have to imagine, for any normal person, being constantly watched and looked at, being kind of poured over, and everyone suspecting you of doing evil. Like they're always trying to catch him. They're always trying to entrap him. I think for any normal person that would become very exhausting. So I wonder if Jesus, I don't know to what extent Jesus, what's the word, like, not incorporates it, but I don't know to what extent Jesus personalizes this. I mean, there are times when the crowds come out to him and he's tired. So does tired just mean a bodily tired, or is there an emotional tiredness? After his temptation, the angels come and tend to him. We assume they come and tend to him because he's tired. I mean, he's tired physically. He's probably hungry. But he doesn't immediately go and do more ministry. He doesn't immediately go out and do more stuff. So there needs to be a time of rest for him. So we would assume that there is some tiredness, which I think is the I hope I'm not going to like violate our creedal understandings of Christ here, but biblically it says there are times where he wanted to rest. There were times that he did rest. But most of the time when he was resting, he was resting by communing with his Father, which was prayer. So being out of that, I mean, think about it for a minute. For all of creation, and this is infinite. We don't know how long the Trinity was dwelling together in unity and love before creation, right? If you can even put a label time on that. So I don't think you can. But Jesus' existence is one of being in unity and love with the Father and the Spirit. Like that. So what does the Trinity do? The Father loves the Son loves the Spirit loves the Father loves the Spirit, the Christ loves the Spirit loves Christ. And so, that old picture of the three circles, is so apropos. And I think there's I believe I've seen one where it's kind of like where it's one going into another. See if I can draw this. I can't. Where basically it looks like one is kind of weaving into the next, and so on and so forth, like an unending circle, right? They just keep. So I think a good way of understanding what the Trinity does and what the Trinity is doing is, they're just in the process of loving one another, right? So Jesus goes from that reality to taking on human flesh, which is a change for him. It has to be. right? He goes from being the pre-incarnate Christ to the incarnate Christ. By the way, I really hope I'm not screwing up here and teaching something heretical. If I make a mistake, I don't mean to, and you're more than welcome to correct me if I do. That limitation on him now, Jesus, the pre-incarnate Christ, when he takes on human flesh, the human flesh like no longer makes him what he once was. Let's hopefully that's okay. So he's, during his ministry, he's kind of bound to one place. He serves in one time, right? Like he serves chronologically. So he becomes a person who exists above time to a person who exists in time. Moments pass, and he actually grows from infant to adult, right? These kinds of things. The point being is that Christ comes down, and just by becoming human, he actually, well, we would say from the other side of the creed, it's the steps of humiliation, right? It's him doing human things, the Son of God, in order to save us from our sin, right? So he was conceived, born, suffered, died, and was buried. All these things are not necessary for God, but Christ does them in order to save us. So he takes them on. It makes him, as Christ himself says, we're just going over in John 14, that he is, he says himself that he's less than the Father. Or he's, no, he doesn't say he's less than, he says the Father is greater than I. That's what he says. In John 14, I think, shoot. Done it twice now. I should know what verse it is. John 14, let's see here. Yeah. Nope, I'm sorry. Spoke too soon. Yeah, here it is. John 14, verse 28. You heard me say to you, I'm going away and I will come to you. If you loved me, you would have rejoiced because I'm going to the Father, for the Father is greater than I. Now, I mean, I think some of this we can chalk up to Jesus just being humble, right? And living in submission to his Father's will. But I think if we're going to look at this maybe as a substance question, what does that mean? I think Jesus is saying because he's taken on human flesh, because he's taken on these limitations of human flesh, he is less than his Father, which doesn't make him less God, doesn't make him less than his Father, just makes him lesser than his Father, as he says himself. It is a confusing thing, but I think the way we'd understand it would be he means this in terms of the fact that he's taken on human flesh and his Father has not. Yeah. All this is to say, I think we can see the words of Jesus here, right? The scorn he receives from the Pharisees throughout his life, and then the scorn that he receives, the punishment, the suffering, the lies that he receives in the passion narrative as well, right? You think about shame and dishonor. To be hung on the cross was held up for the vilest of offenders, the worst of the worst, and then of course also his modesty was taken because he was stripped of all of his clothing, right? Which is for rabbis a big deal. And the reproach, the judgment of other people upon him, right? The Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, and Pilate have all judged him as being worthy of death. Now, whatever you want to say about Pilate still authorizes it. So he is judging, even though he clearly doesn't want to. He thinks that they're just kind of jealous, but this is what happens. Yeah. Okay, so Verse 20. Herpa sabera libi va'anusa va'akave lanud va'ayin. This is really sad here. So has sabara is to, I think, to break. Yeah, to break in pieces. I wonder if this is okay. Well, here's one thing: is I wonder if it had to do with like a pot. If the majority of the examples here was of pots. Well, here's one. We're throwing break down their sacred pillars. So like objects that are broken or shattered. But a lot of times here it seems to be they're talking about bones, broken bones. So kind of scary, right? So his herpa. Let's look up herpa. A reproach, contempt, disgrace, taunting, scorn. From charaf, to reproach. So, okay. This scorn from other people, right? And I can see that David being seen as a champion, as a warrior, as a king, as a good person. Suddenly, everyone changes and tilts, and wants to see in him nothing but evil, right? It'll be very difficult on a person's sense of themselves, right? So, this reproach has broken my heart. Labi is lave, and then the my at the end here, the e, the yod. So lavi, lave, so it's broken my heart, and I'm full of heaviness. Heaviness. Let's look at that one. That looks interesting. Heaviness. To be sick. That's interesting. To be distressed. To be full of heaviness. So, I almost want to think of, like, kind of in the sense of the word dread, but not dread, because dread usually is used in reference to when facing down another army, or anxiety of like punishment or judgment, or violence that is to come, right? But dread in this context, in the sense of like just whatever's going on is weighing so heavy on his heart that it would be akin to saying, like, just feeling so heavy of heart that you can't get out of bed, you can't do anything, you can't function, right? Va'akave, and I looked for someone, lanud, to have pity, but there was no one. I can't imagine the kind of weight that it is to carry the weight of the world's sin to the cross, but I have to imagine it's pretty close to va'unasa. This dread, this heaviness of heart, right? I mean, Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane and he's sweating drops of blood. And I think that's getting at whatever this thing is. I looked for someone to take pity, but there was no one. So everyone's turned their back on him, even his family, his wife, his kids. Everyone's turned their back on him. Vela nahaim, velo masati, and for comforters, but none was found. So he looked for people to have pity on him and people to comfort him, to console oneself, to be sorry. Okay, so this looks like a reflexive pronoun for the most part, nacham. But here it looks like it's being used. Let's see what the case is. The PL. PL is usually what is PL? PL is usually causative. So he's looking for people who would comfort him. Or like we could say it's a part of us. He was looking for comforting ones, like comforting people, but he found none. Right? People who would offer comfort. You know, this might be a good time to bring this out. It's something I don't think we think about enough, but Jesus suffers pain. He suffers scorn, right? But I don't know if we give enough credit or do we talk enough about the fact that he was abandoned by everyone. The only person who gave him any comfort, so to speak, was the thief on the cross. I mean, there's just nobody. Nobody is offering him any comfort. I mean, you could talk about the wine mixed with myrrh, but it's not much. The women who were wailing at the crucifixion, you know, he warns them to cover themselves. There are some, but like the kind of comfort we're talking about here, there really isn't anybody. No one's offering that level of comfort. No one's willing to take pity on him. Which pity, and it's an escalating thing, right? So pity would be, you know, at least you feel bad. Then comfort would be someone who actually offer, you know, would actually offer something. I mean, so he can't even find anybody who feels bad about the situation, who doesn't think this is right. David, but also Jesus, right? There's no pity from anybody. Okay, getting into our last verse then for today, verse 21. And they gave, Vayettenu bebaruti ros velizmai yaskuni hometz. And they gave me babaruti for my food. Barut from bara. Bara is to eat. So it's, you know, the kind of the noun version of eating. They gave me for my food gall, bitter and poisonous herb, venom. Gall. What is the ESV translation? They give me poison for food, and for my thirst, they gave me to drink vinegar. Vinegar would have been a pretty common substance back then because in the process of making wine, you can make vinegar. I think it was something that was regularly used as well. But you can see how spoiled wine, i.e. vinegar, is helpful really in a number of ways, right? There's no sugar in it. So there's no good taste to it. It doesn't give you any comfort. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think in the process of making very sour, no, that's not true. I don't think the alcohol would go away. I think the alcohol would still, so it wouldn't offer any kind of pain numbing or just situation numbing. It'll make the person seem a little better because there's alcohol involved, you know, which just depresses the brain, right? So you don't think about it so much. Yeah, so, and I can't imagine as well too that vinegar would help with thirst. If you drink vinegar, I don't think it would quench your thirst. I think it would make you more thirsty, right? It's highly acidic. So he has no one takes pity, right? No one comforts him. And, you know, prisoners get bread and water to eat. Prisoners do, usually. He doesn't even get what a prisoner would get. No food, no water. You know, they give him, instead of giving him something that might keep him alive, they're giving him things they hope will make him more dead or will make him dead faster. Oh, this, of course, is a prophecy that is talked about on the cross, right? It's quoted when they give Jesus gall to drink. They quote this psalm. So I think we can be pretty. I should say the Bible quotes this psalm. I think we can be fairly clear then that to understand that the apostles, after being taught by, so let's kind of go through the logic train here for a second. We know in Luke 24 that Jesus teaches the apostles about the Old Testament to help them see where he is, where what God is doing through the Old Testament. Then the apostles, when writing the scriptures, right, writing the gospel, they quote this psalm, and then they say, well, the prophecy comes true in Christ. And I think we can take from that as well that there is a way that the apostles are seeing that this is prophetic about Christ, that God is speaking through David truths about Jesus Christ, which is the only, like, what else would you need to say prophetically? Maybe you talk about the end times, the last day, but there's not much else to talk about except for Jesus, right? So it makes sense they're going to talk about Christ. And if the apostles quote this thing and say this was about Christ, I think we can assume that Christ was teaching them about it in Luke 24, right? We don't know what exactly Christ taught them, but I think we can assume that Christ probably taught them about this psalm, which is why they make the connection that, oh, look at the prophecy is fulfilled here. So if God is saying there's a connection, that Christ himself, where again, we're kind of on a logic train that's a lot of assumptions, but if Christ is saying, hey, this is about me, and the apostles quote it and they teach it, well, then we can understand that like sometimes God is speaking through the Psalms in ways that seem like David, but there's a larger truth there. So maybe it's Christ speaking here through David. A sad situation, right? For sustenance, they give him poison. There's no one has pity on him. There's no one's going to give any comfort. They have made all of his dishonor, all of his shame, all of his reproach public knowledge, right? Which you can see on the cross. This is a very negative set of verses. Okay, it's hard to leave here, but we remember that the end of the story of the cross is that Christ rose from the dead, conquered sin, death, and the devil, and gave us entrance into eternal life and the new heavens and new earth, right? So no matter how bleak these verses are, remember that through Christ you are saved and given grace upon grace. Have a wonderful weekend. Go to Bible study. Go to your pastor's Bible study, your pastor. Go to church on Sunday. Receive the sacrament if you have that wonderful opportunity. And the Lord bless and keep you. Bye now.